Interrogation of Oberleutnant xvii Kohler, First Lieutenant of U-451, a 500-ton U-boat attacked at about 0400 on 21st December 1941 off Cape Spartel. Section 1. Introductory Remarks. This report contains material derived from the interrogation of the First Lieutenant of U-451, as well as extraneous matter obtained from survivors of U-433 and U-95. The term extraneous matter in this connection indicated material not immediately connected with the early history, cruises, sinking, and manning of the U-boats concerned. The decision to incorporate all such extraneous matter relating to U-451, U-433, and U-95 in one report is based largely on the consideration that these three U-boats were all disposed of in the vicinity of Gibraltar, having just entered or attempted to enter the Mediterranean through the Straits of Gibraltar. It should be borne in mind, however, that no conclusive evidence is available to show beyond doubt that U-451 has actually been sunk. Kohler, the first lieutenant who was captured, describes her chances of having escaped as 50-50. Section 2. Crew of U-451. A full list of known members of the crew of U-451 is given in Appendix 1 to this report. This list was obtained from documents captured from U-570 in August 1941 and may therefore have undergone some alteration. The names of the second officer of the watch and of the engineer officer are not, however, known at present. The complement of U-451 totaled 43, of whom probably 4 were officers, 15 chief petty officers, and 24 were ratings. It is interesting to note that all these 24 ratings were enrolled in 1940, thus again appearing to support the view that the German naval authorities are being forced to rely more and more on inexperienced ratings with which to man the U-boat arm. Chief petty officers and petty officers, however, appear to have had the necessary experience for the proper execution of their duties. The only prisoner captured from U-451 who may be the sole survivor is Oberleutnant xvii Walter Kohler of the 1935 term. Born in Lübeck, Kohler has been connected all his life with the sea, and his brother is also in the German Navy, an Oberleutnant in a shore appointment connected with supplies. Kohler did not give the impression of being a particularly obstinate type, but it was evident that he was extremely security conscious, even to the extent of refusing to give names of his brother officers in U-451. In 1938, as a sub-lieutenant, he served in the battleship Scharnhorst, and was probably in this ship after the outbreak of war. He had been decorated with the Iron Cross Second Class in the early months of the war, and had been present at the sinking of HMS Rawalpindi and of HMS Glorious. He did not appear in the least disturbed at the possible loss of his shipmates in U-451. As the period of interrogation progressed, he seemed to be convincing himself that there was, after all, a very good chance of U-451 having escaped and having returned to her base. The commanding officer of U-451 was Captain Lieutenant Hoffmann, probably Gunther Hoffmann, who was described by Kohler as being very popular with his shipmates. Section 3. Early History of U-451. U-451 was a 500-ton U-boat type xiii built at the Deutsche Werke Kiel. The sole prisoner captured from this U-boat, the first lieutenant, refused to disclose when U-451 was laid down or launched, but it is known from other sources that she was commissioned on 3rd May 1941. No information regarding her trials was forthcoming during interrogation. She was attached to the 3rd U-boat flotilla. No coherent account of U-451's first war cruises could be obtained, but from disjointed statements made by the prisoner about his U-boat adventures, it would appear that in midsummer she was based at Kirkenes in northern Norway and operated in the White Sea against Russian shipping. The prisoner related that he was present in a U-boat, very possibly U-451, when a Russian destroyer was sunk in the White Sea. He alleged that a large merchant vessel was first sighted on this occasion, and an attempt was made to overhaul her. The merchant vessel saw the submarine approaching and, turning away, made off at an emergency speed of 17 or 18 knots. The U-boat's commander, who was at the periscope, remarked to those about him, "All right, let her go. There's another coming on behind." According to the prisoner, the U-boat submerged as the second ship approached, and a torpedo was fired, the commander commenting, "It's only a small 1500 ship." A moment later, however, he changed his mind and shouted, "Boys, that was a destroyer." The prisoner stated that life was quite enjoyable in the Kirkenes, where there were frequent drinking bouts in the house of the local political commissar. Girls, 18 to 20 years of age, who belonged to a local Norwegian voluntary labor organization, were obliged to provide entertainment at these parties, which frequently continued throughout the night. The prisoner was not impressed with the officials at the Kirkenes base, and remarked that on one occasion, when he went to order some more potash cartridges for air-cleansing purposes, he was asked whether he needed them to shoot with. The prisoner alleged that he also took part in a cruise off the Bristol Channel, where a fast 13,000-ton freighter was encountered at night. The moon was obscured and visibility nil. The stern tube was fired, which missed. The merchant vessel then escaped at an estimated speed of 18 knots. It could neither be ascertained when this incident occurred, nor whether U-451 was the U-boat involved. Section 4. Last War Cruise of U-451. Kohler stated that U-451 left Kiel on her last war cruise on 25 November 1941. She proceeded to the Atlantic, and having had no success, put into Lorient, where she remained for 1.5 days, presumably to complete with oil. According to the first lieutenant, U-451 now received orders to proceed to the Mediterranean. She proceeded south, and when off the coast of Portugal, received a signal giving the position of a British cruiser. U-451 decided to lie in wait for this ship, but apparently made a bad miscalculation, for Kohler alleged that they later heard that the cruiser had passed 30 miles to the westward of them. The prisoner remarked that it was just as well that they had missed the cruiser, as they had been informed that 60 German prisoners of war were on board. U-451 continued her course towards Gibraltar and was attacked by an aircraft as she was attempting to pass through the straits. NID note: the name of this cruiser has not been identified. Section 5. Attack on U-451. According to the prisoner, U-451 was attempting the passage of the straits on the surface on the early morning of 21st December 1941. Kohler was on the bridge with 3 ratings. U-451 was proceeding at full speed, and the noise from her diesel exhausts drowned the roar of an approaching aeroplane until it was too late. The first the prisoner saw of the plane was at the moment when it released a bomb. This bomb fell ahead of the U-boat and burst beneath it. Water poured through the conning tower hatch, and the 3 ratings managed to enter the boat, but Kohler was unable to follow suit before the hatch was closed. He stated that the U-boat then sank bows down. The prisoner flung himself into the water and swam for an hour and a half before he was picked up by Myosotis. The report from the Swordfish aircraft of the 812 Squadron responsible for this attack describes how U-451 was first detected by ASV at a range of 3.5 miles and about 18 miles northwest of Cape Spartel. The Swordfish closed the contact and sighted the U-boat on the surface, steering to the eastward. 3 depth charges were dropped ahead of the U-boat and across her bows. The center depth charge of the stick, set at 25 feet, exploded immediately under the U-boat, which was not seen again. The details of the U-boat's disappearance could not be observed as U-451 was enveloped in the spray of the depth charge explosions. 2 large oil patches were seen, each 300 yards in diameter. The first lieutenant of U-451 was unable to express a definite opinion as to whether his boat was destroyed, but his correspondence indicates that he considered himself to be the sole survivor. Section 6. Star Turn U-Boat Commanders. The following is a list of the more successful U-boat commanders who have been awarded the Knight insignia of the Iron Cross and Oak Leaves. Gunther Prien, lost in U-47 on 8341. Herbert Schulze, Otto Schuhart, Wilhelm Rollmann, Otto Kretschmer, prisoner of war from U-99, 17341. Fritz Julius Lemp, lost in U-110, 9541. Heinrich Liebe, Werner Hartmann, Hans Rusing, Fritz Frauenheim, Engelbert Endras, Heinrich Kunke, Joachim Schepke, lost in U-100, 17341. Hans Jenisch, Heinrich Bleikroth, Viktor Orn, Wolfgang Luth, Reinhard Surin, Viktor Schütze, Hans-Gerrit von Stockhausen, Oskar Muhl, Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock, Jürgen Ostin, Wilhelm Schulz, Herbert Kupisch, Herbert Wulfarth, prisoner of war from U-556, 27641, Georg Schul, Klaus Korth, Gunther Hessler, Erich Topp, Jost Metzler, Adalbert Schnee, Rolf Mutzelberg, Mengersen, Guggenberger, Schulz, Kentrat, Bigalk, Xiii, Freiherr von Tiesenhausen. Section 7. Other U-boats. Location of U-boats at certain dates from statements made by various prisoners. By boat, date, location. U-61, October 1941, attached to U-boat School Pillau. U-62, October 1941, attached to U-boat School Pillau. U-96, October 1941, Saint Nazaire. U-205, October 1941, based on an Italian port. U-552, November 1941, Saint Nazaire, badge Red Devil. U-557, November 1941, Mediterranean. U-567, 9th November 1941, left Saint Nazaire with U-433. U-34. A prisoner from U-95 stated that he had made 3 war cruises in U-34 when commanded by Captain Lieutenant Wilhelm Rollmann. His first cruise commenced from Wilhelmshaven towards the end of 1940 and was of 3 to 4 weeks' duration, returning to Lorient for Christmas leave. During this cruise, they had proceeded north of the Shetlands and had sunk one ship of 6,000 tons, which was sailing independently. His second cruise commenced early in January 1941 and lasted 4 weeks. No mines, but 12 or 13 torpedoes were carried. About the middle of January 1941, 3 steamers, totaling 25,000 tons, were sunk from a convoy, other U-boats cooperating. U-34 returned to Lorient for a full month before sailing again about the middle of March 1941. This cruise lasted 4 weeks and was barren of results. U-34 is known to have cooperated with U-30, taking part in the Norwegian operations in April 1940. It was confirmed that U-34 had been transferred to the U-boat training flotilla early in 1941. U-57. A prisoner from U-433 stated that he had served in U-57 from spring 1940 until September 1940, during which time he made 3 cruises in the North Atlantic, sinking 6 or 7 ships, totaling 50,000 tons, more than half being sunk out of convoys. He added that with Top, who was then a lieutenant in command, this boat was sunk towards the end of 1940 off the entrance to the Kiel Canal at Brunsbüttel as a result of a collision with a Norwegian ship. 6 of the crew were drowned, but the boat, which was a 250-tonner type xiii, was subsequently raised and is probably now used for training. NID note: it had been previously stated that Captain Lieutenant Klaus Korth was in command at this time. See CB 405121. U-71. A prisoner from U-95 stated that U-71 had failed to sink any ships during her last 3 cruises. This boat, believed to be commanded by Captain Lieutenant Flachsenberg, was further stated to have fired a salvo of 4 torpedoes at 6 destroyers without result. U-74. A German communique of 7th January 1942 stated that Captain Lieutenant Kentrat had sunk 9 enemy merchant vessels and had torpedoed 4 others, the sinking of which could not be observed owing to the action of the escorting war vessels. U-101. The Knight insignia of the Iron Cross was awarded on 23 November 1941 to Captain Lieutenant Mengersen, the commanding officer of U-101. It was stated that he had sunk 19 armed enemy ships of a total tonnage of 128,271 gross tons, in addition to 1 destroyer. U-108. On 7th January 1942, the Knight insignia of the Iron Cross was awarded to Corvette Captain Schultz, in command of U-108. He was stated to have sunk 11 armed merchant ships, totaling 74,893 tons. His latest successes were gained when attacking a convoy strongly protected by destroyers, patrol vessels, and an aircraft carrier. He followed the convoy for 6 days and succeeded in sinking 2 ships and torpedoing 1 other. NID note: this appears to be the homeward-bound convoy HG-76, which reached the United Kingdom, having been attacked continuously for several days, during which the following U-boats were sunk: U-131 on 17th December, U-434 on 19th December, and U-574 on 19th December 1941. Several prisoners from these boats seemed convinced that Schultz's boat had also been sunk during this attack, but this belief seems to have only been due to the fact that U-108 had not replied to signals sent out by the Vice Admiral commanding U-boats. U-123. A German communiqué dated 24th January 1942 stated that Captain Lieutenant Hardigan, operating with other U-boats off the North American and Canadian coasts, had sunk 18 merchant ships of a total tonnage of 125,000 tons. Hardigan himself had sunk 8 of these, totaling 53,000 tons, among which were 3 tankers off New York. U-124. On 26 November 1941, the German government announced that a U-boat under the command of Captain Lieutenant Moore had sunk in the Atlantic a British cruiser of the Dragon class. Moore is believed to be in command of U-124. A later communiqué, dated 14th January 1942, stated that this ship was the HMS Dunedin. The cruise on which this ship was sunk was mentioned as being the 13th expedition of this boat. U-137. A prisoner from U-433 had served with Captain Lieutenant Wohlfarth in U-137 up to January 1941. Wohlfarth later commanded U-556, which boat was sunk on 27th June 1941. See Confidential Book 4051-26. During one of the cruises in U-137, Wohlfarth attacked 3 destroyers. This attack was described as suicidal. However, he was able to escape and return to harbor in spite of damage. 3 of the crew became hysterical during this attack, when it was alleged as many as 160 depth charges were dropped, and 1 petty officer had to be tied to his bunk. It was stated that on account of the experience, the whole crew became nervous and panicky. The presence of mind of 1 man saved the boat. U-203. On 23 November 1941, the German radio announced that the Knight insignia of the Iron Cross had been awarded to Captain Lieutenant Mutzelberg, believed to be in command of U-203. He was reported to have sunk 11 armed enemy merchant vessels totaling 75,000 tons, also a British destroyer, and had torpedoed 4 more ships. A further broadcast on 25 November 1941 stated that this officer had carried out 4 successful operations against the enemy. On the first of these, he is said to have sunk 4 large merchant ships out of a convoy on its way from the United States to Great Britain. On the second operation, he sank 5 merchant vessels and 1 destroyer. This success was reported in a German broadcast on 4th August 1941. The third operations, he is said to have sunk 2 merchant ships and to have torpedoed an additional 2 ships. It was claimed that on the 4th and most recent cruise, he had sunk 50,000 tons of shipping, thus bringing his total sinkings up to 180,000 tons and 1 destroyer. U-331. The German radio reported on 28 November 1941 that a U-boat under the command of Freiherr von Tiesenhausen had attacked a British battleship off Solam and had scored a direct hit with 1 torpedo. On 16 December 1941, von Tiesenhausen himself came to the microphone and described this attack as follows: 3 battleships were sighted, disposed quarterly to port, screened on each side by 4 destroyers. The U-boat slipped through this screen on each side by 4 destroyers. The U-boat slipped through this screen and attacked the second battleship, diving immediately afterwards. In spite of heavy depth charging, the U-boat returned unscathed. Von Tiesenhausen was awarded the Knight insignia of the Iron Cross Ritterkreuz for this exploit in 27th January 1942. NID note: this battleship was HMS Barham. U-371. On 16th November 1941, it was officially announced by Germany that Oberleutnant Xerxes Driver sank a British cruiser of the Leander class off Alexandria, subsequently claimed by Germany to be the Neptune. Driver is believed to be in command of U-371. NID note: Galatia was sunk by torpedo at 23:59, 14th December 1941, off Ras El Tin Light. Neptune was sunk by mine off Tripoli. U-552. One of the crew of U-552, under the command of Captain Lieutenant Top, broadcast on 4th November 1941. It was then stated that the sinkings of the U-boat had been 22 ships, totaling 133,000 tons. U-751. On 24th December 1941, an official German announcement stated that the British aircraft carrier Unicorn, in reality this was HMS Audacity, had been sunk by Captain Lieutenant Bigalk, believed to be in command of U-751. Several broadcasts were made describing this attack, and on 30th December 1941, Bigalk himself came to the microphone. From this talk, it appears that U-751 had been at sea for only 8 days when the aircraft carrier was sunk, so that she must have left harbor on or about the 11th December 1941. Bigalk was awarded the Knight Insignia of the Iron Cross on 7th January 1942 in recognition of this success. U-A. This U-boat, originally built for Turkey by the Germania Yard Kiel, was stated to have been fitted with Danish diesels, giving a speed of 22 knots. A radius of action of 20,000 miles was claimed. This boat was formerly commanded by Kohaus, who now commands the U-boat flotilla at Brest. During a recent cruise, which was stated to have had a duration of 10 weeks, no sinkings were claimed, and the boat had returned home in need of repair. It was stated that the U-A is a so-called Ostboot, and under normal conditions can operate for a period of 8 months without having to undergo a refit. It was confirmed that Eckermann now commands U-A. New types of U-boats. A prisoner from U-433, who had been in Danzig when this U-boat was under construction there, stated that a new type of U-boat of approximately 200 tons is being built at Schischenwerft, Danzig. This prisoner stated that he had been on board one of the boats, which had no stern tubes. Section 7. U-boat losses. U-63. The loss of U-63 was confirmed. It was stated that von Stockhausen had made 3 cruises in this boat and had sunk 100,000 tons. Von Stockhausen went sick and was relieved by Captain Lieutenant Hoppe, who was lost in this boat in April 1941. NID note: it is not known to what cause the loss of U-63 is attributable. Von Stockhausen is stated now to be an instructor at some Norwegian port. U-73. There appears to be no truth in the report that U-73, under the command of Rosenbaum, had been captured by the Russians. U-401. On 2nd December 1941, the obituary notice of Captain Lieutenant Gero Zimmermann appeared in the German press. This officer belongs to the 1929 term. On the outbreak of war, he was intelligence officer at Swinemünde. In July 1941, von Mullenheim-Rechtberg, prisoner of war from the Bismarck, said that Gero Zimmermann was in Danzig and had recently taken command of a U-boat there. The series U-401 to U-416 500-ton U-boats type 7C are under construction at Danzig. One prisoner stated that he thought Zimmermann had been in command of U-401 and that she had been lost sometime during the summer of 1941. This boat is known to have been commissioned in April 1941. It is possible that this is the U-boat sunk by HMS Hydrangea and Campanula on 3rd August 1941. U-557. The German High Command announced on 16th December 1941 that a U-boat under the command of Captain Lieutenant Otto Paulsen had attacked a British cruiser formation in the eastern Mediterranean off Alexandria and sunk by torpedo a British cruiser which broke in two after a violent explosion and went down within a few minutes. NID note: HMS Galatia was sunk by torpedo at 23:59 14th December 1941 off Ras El Chin Light. A British cruiser of the Leander class was also claimed by Germany on 18th December to have been sunk by Oberleutnant Xerxes Driver, who was believed to command U-371. On 13th January 1942, the International Red Cross at Geneva inquired whether Ottokar Paulsen, Captain Lieutenant in command of a U-boat in the Mediterranean, was a prisoner of war. This officer had been stated to have been in command of U-557. It would appear, therefore, that this boat was lost with its entire crew on some date in December after 16th. This brings the total number of U-boats sunk in December 1941 up to 8. 2 boats unknown. 2 unknown U-boats were stated by prisoners of war to have been lost during exercises in the Baltic during November 1941. A U-boat under the command of Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Ratsch. Prisoners state that this U-boat had been rammed during the night by another U-boat under the command of Corvette Captain Wilfried Reichmann while exercising in the Baltic. Search was made for survivors, but nothing had been found except for 2 empty life-saving jackets. The bows of Reichmann's boat had been bent at right angles. The obituary notice of Heinrich Ratsch appeared in the German press on 29th November 1941. From prisoner of war correspondence, it appears that Ratsch commissioned a new U-boat during the summer of 1941. B. A U-boat under the command of Captain Lieutenant Hans Kohlmann was rammed by the Hamburg, so prisoners of war stated, while carrying out night firing practice in the Baltic. Oberleutnant Xerxes Klaus Haide, brother of Wolfgang Haide, prisoner of war from U-434, was among the casualties. Kohlmann and some of the crew were picked up after having been some hours in the water. The U-boat sank with the remainder of the crew. Kohlmann had last been heard of on 29th August 1941 when he was in Hamburg. The number of his boat has not yet been ascertained. Section 9. General Remarks on U-boats. Tactics. A prisoner from U-433 stated that U-boats were afraid of corvettes, as their camouflage makes them appear at a distance like large vessels. The speed of the corvettes was appreciated, and likewise the efficiency of their ASDICs. It was confirmed that U-boats have orders to dive whenever aircraft is sighted, and that these orders are strictly observed. Organization. It was stated that the newly created Western Mediterranean U-boat Command was to be known as Mittelmeer West, Western Mediterranean, and that the flotilla based on an Italian port, possibly Spezia, would be the 27th or 29th and was commanded by Schroeder. The other Mediterranean U-boat command was stated to be known as Mittelmeer Ost, Eastern Mediterranean, and based on a Greek port. The number of the flotilla based here was said to be the 26th, under Kapitänleutnant Frauenheim, who has been credited with sinking a total of 161,000 tons and has been decorated with the Knight insignia of the Iron Cross, Ritterkreuz. Chief Quartermasters in U-boats. The Chief Quartermaster of U-433 kept a watch as officer of the watch and, in addition, assisted the captain with navigation. He claimed to have a good knowledge of navigational instruments and charts. Scuttling Charges. A prisoner from U-95 stated that scuttling charges for U-boats were timed to detonate 30 seconds after ignition. Aircraft Reconnaissance. The U-boat command was stated to have 5 Focke-Wulf aircraft manned by naval pilots continuously at its disposal. These aircraft locate the convoys and signal the position continuously. U-boats are informed if any of these naval reconnaissance aircraft are shot down. Diving tests. Prisoners stated that a routine diving test was carried out daily, usually in the forenoon, and that it was generally arranged in conjunction with the exercising of action stations. Fighter escort. A prisoner stated that a U-boat had sailed from St. Nazaire shortly before the departure of U-433. This other U-boat was hit by an aircraft bomb when some 40 miles out, and had to return to port. All U-boats are, in consequence, now to receive fighter escort on sailing. Mines. A prisoner speaking of non-contact mines mentioned that an improved type had been put into service. This mine was stated to be very dangerous to lay and could actually be detonated by the vibrations set up by the human voice. Several different kinds of firing gear were said to be used in this new type mine. Badges. All U-boats of the St. Nazaire Flotilla, 7th, were stated to have Priam's Snorting Bull, the steer of Scapa Flow, as badge. Section 10. Miscellaneous Remarks. German auxiliary cruisers. A boatswain's mate from U-433 stated that German auxiliary cruisers sailed under the British merchant flag, and if stopped by a British warship, they had orders to withhold their fire until the British ship had stopped and was lowering her boats. He stated that the Sydney had been sunk in this manner, and that German commanders had received orders to carry out this procedure. Invasion fleet. A prisoner from U-433 who was in Le Havre in September 1940 stated that he then observed an invasion fleet partially inside and partially outside the harbor. The fleet consisted of 75 ships, each of about 8,000 tons, and capable of transporting a total of 100,000 men. This prisoner added that on the night before the invasion was to take place, the ships were bombed and 5 were sunk. Interrogation of British prisoners. Corvette Captain Rosing, who had commanded U-48 sometime during the latter part of 1940, was said to be now the security officer at Bordeaux. This officer had also commanded the U-boat flotilla at Kiel, in which capacity he had interrogated British and Allied prisoners, including the commanding officer of HMS Seal. Rosing had informed some of U-43's crew that Seal's commander had been most communicative, and he warned his crew not to do likewise if captured. Italian submarine Giuliani. It was now confirmed that an Italian submarine had been based in Gotenhaven. NID note: this submarine is the Italian Giuliani, which is known to be used for training Italian officers under German instruction. See CB 40938. Appendix 1. List of some of the crew of U-451, etc. Total 41. Appendix 2. Translation of an account by a boatswain's boatswain's mate, 2nd class, on the departure of U-95 from Lorient on her 7th and last war cruise, 16th November, 1941. It was just such another day as so many we had experienced. The evening before, there had been the usual goodbye parties which usually end in the majority of the crew becoming helplessly drunk. Anyone who knows the life of a U-boat man in a French harbor will certainly understand this. Although we always have time on our hands while our boat is in dock, everything is inevitably left till the last day. Suitcases have to be given up, quarters cleaned, fresh provisions taken on board, letters written, medical examinations undergone, and so on. In the meantime, everyone brings their personal possessions on board. Everybody knows how cramped space is aboard a U-boat, but nevertheless, many people would be astonished at the amount of private treasures smuggled into the ship. Photos of every sort and size, all kinds of French scent, souvenirs, necklets, rings, etc. Each man has a talisman. When everything is finished, the crew fall in to be numbered off, and are then dismissed. All must be on board 1 hour before sailing. The short interval is generally filled with saying goodbye to friends. The over-thirsty ones stop for a quick one on their way to the ship. For some days we had been noticing much that seemed strange to us. What actually was so, no one knew, but something was different. The rumors which went the rounds of the ship hinted at something mysterious. We did not remain long in suspense. As soon as we cast off, the commander made something known to us. It was wretched weather, thick mist and drizzling rain, which naturally did little to raise our spirits. A band was playing farewell tunes. All the dockers who had been on board during our long stay in port were standing on the jetty together with many of our comrades. Naturally, the fair sex was well represented. We received flowers as a parting gift. The chief of the flotilla spoke a few heartening words, and our commander then went to say goodbye. 2 boats were leaving at the same time. As we had the outside berth, we had to cast off first. We waited for the other boat to cast off, and then increased speed in line ahead, passing the crowds assembled on the pier. The noise of our diesels nearly drowns the hurrahs from the pier. But we answered with 3 cheers, upon which the band played "We're Sailing Against England." Almost immediately we were swallowed up in the mist. Scarcely were we away when the fun started. The escort, which should have accompanied us out, was naturally not there. She had gone to meet an incoming boat. After half an hour, the U-boat hove in sight. Of course, without the escort, we lay with stopped engines. Haven't you seen the escort?" our commander sang out. "Yes, she'll be up soon." Slowly, the dusk deepened, and the commander wanted to drop anchor for the night if the escort did not arrive shortly. "The vessel off the starboard bow," shouted the lookout. The escort came in sight. Our diesels started up again, and we were off. After 2 hours, we dropped the escort. The signalman reported a message from the escort to our commander. "My escort finished. Wish you and crew good voyage. Much success." We replied, "Many thanks." Those who were not on watch were grouped on the bridge. The weather had slightly improved. It was now pitch dark. "Escort out of sight," cried the lookout. As soon as we dropped the escort, we increased to full speed ahead in order to get well clear of the coast and through the minefield. For a while we stayed on the bridge, finishing our cigarettes. Then we too climbed down into the boat. My duties from now on were merely to be the watch on deck. An officer and a petty officer forward and 2 ratings aft. I had just gone down to the petty officer's mess when a voice came over the loudspeaker. "From today, we belong to the U-boat flotilla, operational area Western Mediterranean, base Spezia, Italy." There was a sudden hush. Then there was hubbub. Why? What's it all about? What's the idea? And so on. It gradually dawned on me what it meant. We must pass through the Straits of Gibraltar. "Well, it looks as if we're going to have a little swimming to do," said the second petty officer telegraphist. He was off watch, as I was. My watch was at 0400. "If other boats have got through, we shall manage it too," I said. I should feel a good deal better if we were already there." With this last remark, he swung himself into his bunk and drew the curtain. It was some time before I fell properly asleep. A good deal of talking was still going on. Thoughts kept racing through my mind. For some time, I allowed them full rein. Then I pulled myself together sharply. At 0400, the night would be over, and it was already 2300. The happy days in port were over, and we were again out on a war cruise, and keen wits were required. One small mistake, something small left undone, and disaster might follow. On the way to Gibraltar. The end.